Hi, I'm Kesenya and welcome to this week's Astrology Weather Report. I'm your Astro Weather Girl. And today we are looking at the astral sky from the 4th of July through to the 10th of July and what is playing out and of influence this week. Well, there is one big major energy that I would like to focus on this week, and that is the T-square that is being created mid-eclipse. We are in a mid-eclipse week where we're between the two eclipse cycles, between the solar eclipse on the 3rd of July and the lunar eclipse, which will occur on the 17th of July, which I'll talk about in next week's video. So we're mid-eclipse cycle. So what does this mean? Well, I'll explain it to you on the wheel. Firstly, this is where the eclipse occurred, down here in Cancer. The solar eclipse occurred here. And it happened on the 3rd of July rather. And of course, by the 10th, the 9th and 10th of July, the moon will have continued to have kept moving around the horoscope and will be sitting up here in the sign of Libra on the 9th and 10th of July. So of course, it is then going to be making a 90-degree angle to the Sun and a 90-degree angle to Saturn, Pluto and the South Node, and these will be opposing one another still. So it makes what we call in astrology a T-square. Boom, boom, boom. So it's all hard angles. That's what we call them in astrology. These are two 90-degree angles, and this one is a 180-degree angle or an opposition in the chart, which are tense angles. So I'll explain a little bit more in a minute about a T-square's energy, but you need to know that it's made up of angles that are not usually supportive, that they're challenging, that they bring friction, that they bring tension into our lives. And we'll talk about how that will play out in our lives in just a minute. But what is going to happen to us at an emotional level and a manifesting level? Well, this mid-eclipse T-square that is occurring, and we get a T-square mid-eclipse cycle every time we have an eclipse. Eclipses are triggered by the sun and the moon, and the moon takes a whole month to move around, do one cycle of the horoscope, and so when we've got an eclipse happening, there is a new moon usually on one node and a full moon on the other node, and in the in-between week between that occurrence we get the T-square. It happens every time there's an eclipse cycle, but it can feel like stress for us on these days, the 9th and 10th. It can feel like a bit of stress, a bit of tension within us emotionally, as well as manifesting in our lives regarding whatever the moon happens to rule in our chart, which we'll go into when I go through all the signs. But in general, the moon rules home, it rules family, family relations, relationships with women, particularly older matriarchal women that we come in contact with. And the moon also rules our mothering, the way we mother, how we interact with our mother, any type of matriarchal or mother figures, plus our own mothering if we are a woman. And these things can all feel fairly stressed right now, fairly pressured. Also our relationships as well, because the moon is emotional and it correlates to our emotions, and naturally relationships like intimate partnerships and marriages and datings and boyfriends and girlfriends and things, they correlate to our emotions in this current day and age. Our relationships are usually in this day and age based on emotional connection with another person. So because of that, our emotions can also, our emotional relationships can also be affected at this time as well. So we can, all these relationship dynamics within us can feel pressured right now for reasons we might not even be able to explain. So we nothing has triggered us on the outer level, but we just have this tension, this anxiety, anxiousness, or cranked up emotions within us that cause this tension and pressure now with these types of relationships in our life. It can indicate a feeling when we have this T-square playing out on an emotional level. We can have negative and heavy emotions, particularly as Saturn is involved in a square to the moon. So Saturn can bring along self-criticism and heavy sort of, a worst case scenario, depression. So you know, you can expect that on these days you might just feel really heavy. You know what that's like when you just everything you want to do, instead of that light, buoyant, bubbly, optimistic kind of self that you usually are, you're just dragging your feet one behind the other, like, oh, I just feel exhausted emotionally, I'm not up to this anymore, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm just, you know, emotionally drained. That is the energy of Saturn and Moon square, and so you might feel this particularly on this day as well. There's a feeling of being very vulnerable with this mid-eclipse T-square, like you know, we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know what's going to unfold, you know, what is going on. It's that vulnerability, that feeling of not being in control in life that can crop up now as well. Especially as Pluto is involved in this T-square, and Pluto is the planet connected to having control. So we can feel not out of control, that's not really the energy of this particular transit, but we can be feeling very vulnerable, which also connects to feeling a little out of control, like we don't know what's going to happen and suddenly a wave might crash over us, of, you know, one of life's waves, metaphorically I'm speaking here, crashes over us and we're like, oh, what's just gone on? You know, we're vulnerable to the influences of the universe and the influences that manifest around us at this time. But what the universe is really wanting to shed light on at this time is our emotions, the moon, our habits, any problems that are stumbling blocks for us, any sort of little hiccups that hold us back. And that's really, these cycles of the planets in the horoscope are really all about teaching us, step up a little further, step up a little further, you can overcome this, you can expand to incorporate the polarity, you can expand to integrate these two different energies. It's all about learning to expand a little more, grow a little more, understand a little more as life progresses. So anything that is a stumbling block, any emotions or habits that are causing us not to expand, they're going to have light shed on them at this time. And this is particularly important that this occurs before the next eclipse, in order to clear the way. So what this T-square energy is doing is shedding light on those things, the blockages, the hiccups, the little habits that are, you know, not really helping, in order to enable us to clear out some more energy before we have the lunar eclipse when the moon reaches here on the 17th of July. So T-squares in general, if you've got one in your birth chart, and lots of people do, it's a very common shape configuration to have in the chart, they can give a sense of challenge, both to our circumstances, the outer circumstances we experience in life, but they can also herald some success that can come from an inner tension within us, an inner determination to overcome. It gives a greater energy and resolve within us. Now, I'll give you an illustration of this. I have two sons. One of them has a grand trine in his chart. He is, like, I'm taking myself objectively out of the picture here as his mother. He's incredibly talented, brilliant at English, could drum the first moment he picked up his sticks, barely needed to have a lesson. He was just gifted. He does have lessons though. But, you know, just a really talented guy. But the grand trine is a little bit lazy. And he's like, yeah, whatever. You know, I can, you know, if I've got this talent, I've got this ability, so I don't really need to try. I don't really need to practice. It's okay. I'm cool. Whereas my other son has one of these, a T-square, and he is very talented as well. The T-square can give talents and abilities, but the tension elements, the hard elements, give this determination, this desire, this energy to, and this inner steely resolve to overcome obstacles. And so this son who has this, he dedicates, every night he's doing homework, and like he's just gone into high school, you know, and my other son's never done a drop of homework in his life. So my other son, who's also the one with the Tsquare, is very smart, but he actually pushes himself even more. And that's why in Vedic astrology, having a Tsquare like this in the chart, it's considered to bring success on a material level into our lives, because yes, we've got talents, but we also push ourselves. We also drive ourselves. We're also determined to succeed. So a Grand Trine is a lovely energy to have in the chart. Things flow to us, opportunities come, things land in our lap, it's great. But people with this, a Tsquare, can actually achieve much more in their life because they push themselves, they drive themselves to accomplish things. So this is, if you've got one of these in your chart, don't think it's bad. It's actually tremendously good. You have the determination, the drive, the resolve to overcome any challenges, to overcome any obstacles, and to work with what you've got to make it really manifest well for you and give you something of value. So like in Vedic astrology, they believe it to be one of the most beneficial shapes for material success. So with this unfolding in the chart this week, now is the time to work on any emotional blockages, any bad habits, in order to receive fruition next week when the moon reaches this point and has another eclipse, a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses are all about endings. Solar eclipses are all about beginnings. So in this case, we had a solar eclipse last week, or on the 3rd, just gone. We had a solar eclipse, new moon, which was a new beginning. This one is going to be the fruition. It can indicate endings that will come in. I'll talk more about that with you next week. But what is going on this week is this need to put our determination into action, our inner resolve, our inner energy. We need to knuckle down and deal with anything that is blocking us, any circumstances that have risen up for us as a result of the eclipse. We need to now address those things, knuckle down, get determined, persevere. It's very Saturnian, actually, very the Tsquare. It's about working hard in order to overcome the obstacles and the challenges. When we do that, then we're ready for the eclipse that's coming next week. So this is what's unfolding. Let's take a look at what it's going to mean for each sign. Let's start with Pisces. Let's do something a little bit mixed up, and let's go backwards through the chart. So for Pisces rising people, you guys go first this week. We need to look at what the moon rules in your chart. This is where we can be feeling a little bit of stress this week, whatever the moon rules in the chart. And of course, the moon rules the sign of Cancer, which is Pisces' 5th house. So there might be a bit of stress regarding children this week. There might be a little bit of stress regarding lovers and love affairs and romance and relationships. There might be some sort of stress that crops up regarding pleasure and fun activities. Maybe, I know for me, when this energy rocks around, I'll be at the tail end of my little sojourn away, and that might cause me stress, having to come home again and become a responsible parent to my children again and leave behind all the pleasure and the fun I've had on holiday for the first time in 20 years. So that could cause me stress quite full well. So it could be something as simple as that we might see playing out. But there will be stress in relation to whatever the moon rules for a sign, in this case children, pleasures, fun, joy, hobbies, and romance as well. There might be stress relating to romance, and look, it could just mean that you have to be separated from your lover for a little bit, and that causes you a bit of like, not fair. So that kind of thing. Also, we need to look at where we feel vulnerable, which for Pisces rising people will be in realms of the 8th house. So we might be feeling a little bit vulnerable, a little bit a little bit like anything could happen to us. We're a little bit sort of at the whim, at the mercy of the universe, and so vulnerable to whatever the universe decides regarding crisis things. So this could, when I say crisis, I'm not talking about suddenly you're going to get caught in a landslide or that kind of thing, but it could just be a little crisis. I might get home from holiday, take a look at my bank account and go, oh gosh, mini crisis, I need to do a few extra days of work or something to make things right again because I've spent too much money on my holidays. So that's like a little mini crisis. So it can be things like that, but this is the house of crisis, so we can be feeling a little bit vulnerable regarding other people's money, receiving from other people, our sexuality. We might be feeling vulnerable about our sex life or our lack of sex life in my case, and we could also feel a little bit vulnerable, like I said, about transformation, rebirth and regeneration issues. So you might have had an experience with the eclipse that you are just totally transformed. Life just turned around 180 degrees and now you are heading down a brand new highway with your life if you're Pisces rising, and you might feel a bit vulnerable with this sudden new change in direction, this transformation, this death and rebirth experience that you've gone through, this regeneration experience, this new rebirth that you might have actually experienced as a result of the eclipse. So heads up on that one, you might be feeling vulnerable in all those realms, or one of those realms, doesn't have to be all of them. Okay, moving along, let's go backwards. Aquarius rising people. So if you're Aquarius rising, this moon Libra is falling in your 9th house and Cancer is your 6th house. So you might be feeling a little bit stressed regarding 6th house issues. You might be feeling a little bit stressed regarding an issue with a pet or with an enemy that's arisen in your life, and suddenly there's a bit of argy-bargy and there's a bit stressful regarding some issue with an enemy. 6th house is enemies. It's also our area of service, what we do to pay the bills, and so there might be a little bit of stress regarding your daily work, your routines, your health routine. There might be a bit of stress there. You know, maybe you've been trying to get to the gym for a week and you haven't been able to get there, and you're feeling like, oh my god, I just need to go and exert some energy and get this momentum out of my system, you know, and I just can't seem to find time to get to the gym. So there can be just a little bit of stress around your daily routine and your health routine and your exercise and that sort of thing. So you might notice that this week if you are Aquarius rising. And of course the moon is falling in your 9th house, so this is where you can feel a little vulnerable this week, and so your vulnerability might be around travels. Maybe you had planned to do a bit of traveling, maybe you wanted to get out and explore or do something, or expand your mind and your soul through immersion in other cultures, or through exploring belief systems, you know, reading spiritual books, and you had every intention of doing that, but then, you know, you jumped into some spiritual book, maybe you got a hold of the I Ching and you started to read it or something like that, and then you were confronted. You're confronted by these new philosophies, these new belief systems that you've encountered through experiencing other cultures, reading spiritual books, etc., etc., and suddenly you feel vulnerable. You feel like, oh my god, I've been behaving like XYZ. What kind of karma am I drawing into my life? And oh, now I feel really ill at ease about maybe what I've believed in the past and what I thought was true in the past, and now I don't know really what I believe anymore. I'm redefining that. I'm on a reassessment process with my beliefs, with my higher understanding, my knowledge of philosophy, etc. So you can feel very vulnerable around those things. You can feel vulnerable if you're traveling. It's not like it's a bad time to travel, that's not the case, but you can feel there might be a situation that arises that leaves you feeling a little bit vulnerable. Maybe a piece of luggage goes missing or something like that, and you suddenly left feeling a bit vulnerable through some sort of travel, particularly travel to another culture. That could also pop up as well. Or you might have an incident, not necessarily a bad incident, but just some sort of dynamic exchange with a father figure, your actual father, or a father figure, or a mentor, or a benefactor, and you have some sort of exchange, and it just leaves you feeling a little bit vulnerable, a bit like, well, I didn't really know that she felt like that about me, and now where do I stand? You know, you're just feeling a little bit vulnerable, a little bit lost perhaps. So for Aquarius rising, that's what can be experienced this week. For Capricorn rising, this makes a T-square on your ascendant to your descendant, well, depending what degree that falls in, but your first house, your 7th house, and your 10th house. So this is quite an influential placement because these are angular houses, so the influence is strong and the influence is powerful when we have this falling in an angular house. So for you, Cancer rules your 7th house. You might be feeling a little bit of stress with regard to a business partnership. You might be feeling a little bit of stress regarding a contract that you need to sign, or some new business agreement, or some diplomatic relationship that you're trying to navigate your way through. Some sort of negotiation process that leaves you feeling a bit stressed, a bit like wrung out, like a damp rag that's had the water wrung out of it. So you can be feeling stressed in those roles, as well as with a marriage partner or a committed life partner of sorts. You might be feeling a little bit stressed there. And it doesn't mean that the relationship's fractious. It can mean that you're trying to juggle with your partner. You're trying to juggle family and children and jobs and a business and all the sports commitments that your kids have, and you and your partner are just like, oh my God, this is too much. I am stressed. I'm about to lose it. And all it takes is one little negative word from your partner and it's like, blah. You just may not lose it, but it's just like the stress is unbearable. Sick of this. So watch out for stress in all those potential areas of life, Capricorn rising. And of course, you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable with career at this time because the moon falls here in your 10th house, Libra, connected to career and social status. Now, that's not saying that you're about to lose a job or anything like that, but you might be feeling like, oh, I've had to submit this big project. And how's it going to go down? And you're feeling vulnerable, feeling like, nail biting. How are they going to receive this project that I've submitted? Is it going to pass the test? Are they going to be happy? Are we going to get the new client? These sorts of things. You feel vulnerable regarding something to do with your career or something regarding your social status. Maybe you entered yourself into the Nobel Peace Prize and you're feeling a bit vulnerable, like, oh, should I have done that? Was that a bit audacious of me? I don't even know if you can enter yourself into the running for a Nobel Peace Prize. I think it probably has to be done by somebody else. But anyhow, you get the picture. Your social status, your social recognition, the achievements that you long to achieve in life can give you a sense of vulnerability right now as well. So they're the areas that this energy will be playing out for if you're Capricorn rising. I don't know if you can hear that. My neighbour's trimming his hedge. It's very noisy. Sagittarius rising puts this energy of the T-square, in the second house, 8th house, and the 11th house axis. So what does the moon rule for Sagittarius rising? Well, it rules the 8th house. So you can feel a little bit stressed due to some kind of crisis, due to some kind of unexpected upheaval that comes into your life. And that can be a financial crisis, it could be an emotional crisis, it could be a relational crisis, anything that's a bit sort of roller coastery. That's what a crisis is. You sort of, oh, I don't know where I'm going, hang on tight, so you can expect to feel a little bit stressed if some crisis crops up in your life right now. But aside from that, it may not be that that's what the stress is triggered from. It might be that the stress is triggered from some sort of transformational process that you guys have gone through with the eclipse, because of course the eclipse has occurred and this axis of finances for you and self-worth and self-valuing and rebirth. So you might have gone through this eclipse, especially if you had a planet there getting triggered, through some sort of rebirth process, regeneration process, renewal process. All those things are seen by the 8th house, and so there might be a bit of stress about that. Let's say you had been told by your boss or your company that they would like you to move to Costa Rica, and you're like, oh my God, I've got to move to Costa Rica. Here is a wonderful opportunity for promotion, but I've got to move to Costa Rica. Well, that can cause a complete transformation of the trajectory of your life that you may not have expected, you may not have seen coming. It's out of the blue. And so you are transforming your life trajectory. This is 8th house stuff. Big transformations, big redirections, big rebirths, and maybe a regeneration. Here's your chance to excel, to have that high level new career in Costa Rica, but it means a big change, a big transformation. So that's just one crazy example out of the box. So that's where you can be feeling a bit stressed. Oh my God, how's this going to happen? Can I pull this off? Will this work for me? There's stress regarding some sort of transformation, some rebirth process, some that could be a crisis situation too, that kind of example. So there's stress in those realms. There might even be stress in your sex life too with this placement here, with the moon ruling Cancer, I should say. So your sex life might be feeling a little bit stressful at the moment. It should never feel stressful, you know. Go see a sex therapist if you need to, if this lasts more than a day or two. But you know, you can be feeling a little bit stressed about something, some sexual interaction, or connecting with someone in a sexual way or something like that. All right, for Sagittarius rising, the moon is falling in the 11th house, so this is where you can feel a little bit vulnerable right now too. So you might feel vulnerable regarding your friendships. Maybe there's a friendship that's been happening in your life, and something, maybe you had a little tiff or an argument, or you know, they didn't pay for the coffee and it was their turn because you paid last time, or something crops up and you then feel a bit vulnerable. Well, are they really my friend? Do they really like me? Have we got a relationship here? I'm feeling like, what's going on with me and my friends? So there's this feeling of vulnerability with friendships, with large social groups as well. Maybe you feel a bit vulnerable on the internet. 11th house does correlate to the internet, although I have heard some astrologers say that the 11th house no longer connects to the internet, because the 11th house is actually progressive systems, and the internet's kind of old hat now. We've had it for years and it's not necessarily fresh and new anymore. Everybody's got it. I don't know, my jury is still out on that. I have seen that it still does apply, certainly in people's charts, that's for sure. So, you know, maybe you're online and you're feeling a bit vulnerable. Maybe you joined a dating site, you know, a Bumble or something like that, and you join a dating site and you put yourself out there and you're feeling a bit vulnerable. Well, you know, who's going to contact me? Well, am I going to find anyone that I like, that I want to contact on this new app or whatever? And it just makes you feel a bit vulnerable being on the internet. You release a YouTube video and you don't know how it's going to be received, and everybody hits the dislike button and you're feeling like, oh, vulnerable. So that's just one thing, that if you're Sagittarius rising, you might be exposed to those kind of situations of feeling a little vulnerable this week. If you're Scorpio rising, then the moon rules Cancer, which is your 9th house. So this is where you can be feeling a little stressed. Maybe you might be at university and a university student, and you've got to get some assignments in. It's getting towards the end of the year, or mid-year in Australia as far as the school term goes, and you've got to get in those last few assignments, and some sort of source of higher learning or course you've been undertaking or something just has you feeling stressed, like, oh, I've got to, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, just so busy, I'm stressed with your higher learning. It can also be a stress that might crop up with a mentor or a father figure or a benefactor of some sort. Sorry about the neighbor in the background there trimming his hedge. It's very noisy. I hope it's not disrupting the video too much. But yeah, the relationship with a benefactor can be a bit stressful. Maybe a benefactor tells you some piece of information, or a university lecturer, or some sort of a guru person in your life says, look, hey, I think maybe you need to pull your head in a bit here. It's a bit, what you're doing is a little bit out of control or something, and you're like, oh, what? And it causes you to feel like stressed. Hang on a minute, I'm not like that. They've got me all wrong. They're perceiving me wrong. Well, that's just a silly scenario, but we can have a moment of stress with a benefactor, a mentor, a guru type person as well. We can also feel a bit stressed out about some kind of travel, some sort of travel situation. So maybe, you're coming back from a trip overseas and a piece of luggage goes missing, and it causes you a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety or anxiousness. Where's my luggage? I had my computer in there, and blah, blah, blah. So you can feel a little bit wound up, stressed through some sort of travel experience, or even immersion in some sort of culturally expansive situation can leave you feeling a little bit stressed out, even though it might be a beneficial situation. So maybe, I don't know, you go to some sort of cultural celebration or something, and it's just really challenging for you regarding your beliefs and regarding your own personal practices, and it leaves you feeling a little bit stressed, like, well, what do I really think now? Do I align with those beliefs and those practices and those cultural activities? Is that really what I agree with? And you can be sort of stressing a little bit about that. But rest assured, it's going to be for your greater good and your soul's expansion, especially in the 9th house. So for Scorpio rising, the area of that you might be feeling vulnerable is actually in 12th house matters. The 12th house is connected to spirituality, creativity, divinely inspired creativity, and divinely inspired healing as well. So you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable at the moment regarding those things, vulnerable regarding your spirituality. Maybe the eclipse triggered in you some sort of, because it's happening, the eclipse occurred on the 9th house, 3rd house axis. Maybe you got some sort of inner wisdom or knowledge or higher learning, and some sort of new belief system was revealed to you, and so your whole spiritual foundation is altered and is changed, and you feel a bit vulnerable. What do I really believe? What's really going on in my heart and mind? What is the truth? And you are exploring your newfound spirituality, but you feel a bit vulnerable about that. You know, you're a bit at sea. 12th house rules connected to the sea, but you're a bit at sea about where your beliefs actually lie and what they actually look like, while you redefine yourself in this intermediary period between eclipses. So you can feel vulnerable there. You can feel vulnerable about your creativity. Maybe you have written the most amazing fantasy novel and you've self-published it and you've put it out there for the, you know, for everyone to see, and you're feeling really vulnerable. Here's putting my baby out there. How's it going to be received? What will people think? What will people say? You feel vulnerable. So there's vulnerability in the 12th house there, and even, yeah, maybe you take a moment to sort of have some time out on these days, the 9th and 10th. You have a little bit of time out, or some sort of a escape, sort of an ashram, or you know, you go on a retreat or something for a day or two, or even just an evening, sort of at a day spa or something, just some sort of escape experience. If that occurs, you could feel vulnerable in that environment as well. Suddenly, let's say you go to an ashram for a day or two, and through your meditation times, suddenly something comes up to you in your life, and you're suddenly aware of something. You feel vulnerable, like, oh my God, I've just had a realization, a meditative rise into consciousness that's left me feeling vulnerable. So that can occur too at this time for Scorpio rising as well. If you are Libra rising, well, the moon rules your 10th house. So this is where you might feel a little bit under the pump, stressed out, feeling a little bit deep. The moon rules the house of career, and you might be feeling stressed regarding career. You've got a deadline you've got to meet. You've got a bazillion clients calling you, wanting, where's my permit? Why haven't you done it yet? Have you spoken to this authority person yet? And I used to be a town planner. That's the kind of world we worked in. So you're dealing with all that kind of stuff. You know, you're dealing with clients, dealing with bosses, and you're feeling under the pump and feeling stressed at this time. Also, your social status might be feeling a little bit stressed right now too. Maybe, you know, maybe you have a position of authority somewhere in your local town. Maybe, I don't know, you're head of some committee, and the committee is under investigation for something, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. We haven't done anything wrong, but until they prove us innocent, we're all under suspicion, and stress regarding some social position of authority. So these are some areas where you might be feeling a little bit stressed out, and the area that you're going to feel vulnerable in is maybe tied to that, your own sense of self-worth and self-value and individualization. You know, if you're being stressed in career, and you're you know, you've got a project you've got to get in by the deadline. Well, if you don't get it in, you're going to feel vulnerable about my identity. Who am I? I pride myself on always having things submitted on time. If I don't meet this deadline, I'm going to feel like I have let myself down and my reputation is in tatters, and so on and so on. So you can feel vulnerable about yourself and who you are and how you appear to the world, and it will probably be connected to this realm. So watch out for that one. You can be feeling vulnerable about your career, your social status in some way, and your sense of identity that's tied up with those areas of life right now if you're Libra rising. Okay. Virgo rising people, well, this energy is falling, the moon is falling in your second house, but the moon rules Cancer, and if you're Virgo rising, this is your 11th house. So you're going to be feeling stressed regarding your friends, regarding large groups of people. Maybe you've got a role in a large organization, maybe some sort of humanitarian organization, and something goes wrong and then you're feeling really stressed about it. So let's say you work for Doctors Without Borders or something like that, and you're in this humanitarian organization, you're doing your work, and then a mistake is made, and then, you know, everybody gets really stressed because some sort of mistake has been made and the whole organization's under pressure. That's just one rather largish kind of example that you might experience. So anything to do with large groups of people, humanitarian activism, that sort of thing, or a friendship can feel stressed right now with this energy. So maybe you've had a bestie for the last 5 years and you've been getting along great, and then something's occurred around the time of the eclipse that's really made the friendship feel a bit shaky, and you can be feeling stressed about that. I don't know what I said, I don't know what I did, but now they're really cranky at me and I wish I could get to the bottom of it. Those sorts of energies might be playing out now. Some stress regarding friendships. Also stress regarding rewards and gains, like you might have submitted some kind of important project or had conversations, an intense conversation with a client or something, and now you can be feeling stress about what's the outcome of that going to be. What's the reward for that going to be? Is there going to be gains there? Am I going to receive back now that I've put in all that work, all that effort, all that energy? Am I going to receive back now? Am I going to get the rewards and gains? You can be feeling a little bit stressed about what you might stand to attain or not attain through the work you've done. Now the moon is where we're going to feel vulnerable on these days, the 9th and 10th, and this is the second house. So you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable financially right now about the resources that you make, about your ability to provide for your body's journey through this life, your ability to have enough money for food and clothes and pleasures and good times, to paying your mortgage. These sorts of the resources for living is where you can feel a little vulnerable. You can also feel a little bit vulnerable about your self-worth and your self-value. You know, you might have, let's use that example of having submitted a project and you're feeling a bit vulnerable. Well, is my hard work going to be recognized? Am I going to be validated? Am I going to be seen for who I am here? My sense of self-worth is so tied up in that project that I had to submit. So you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable about your self-worth and your self-value at the moment too. But this is just a momentary blip, a little transit for 2 days roughly, and then it will pass and we will be heading towards the new eclipse that's going to change things up again for us. So now we're looking at Leo rising people. If you are Leo rising, this is going to put the moon in your 3rd house, but Cancer is the sign that the moon rules, and it's your 12th house. So here we see that you could be feeling stressed regarding something to do with your spiritual life, something to do with your creativity, something to do with your capacity to heal at a divine level, or your connection to the divine might be causing you stress. So let's say, your spiritual life's causing you stress. You might have certain spiritual beliefs and they're not accepted by, I don't know, maybe some people at work who think, because the opposite energy is the people we work with in our daily life, and our enemies are also seen through there. And so maybe you have certain spiritual beliefs and the people that you work with think, oh, as if, you know, and you're feeling really stressed about their reception for your spiritual practices. Let's say maybe you have Muslim beliefs and you need to go and pray regularly, you know, at those certain times of day, and the rest of the people in your workplace are like, oh, come on, that's stupid, and that sort of thing. And so you're feeling stressed because of what you believe, what your spiritual life means to you. And so I'm not saying that it's going to come from judgment and out of circumstances all the time. That was just a scenario that I was giving. But there's something to do with being stressed about your spirituality, your beliefs, your connection to the divine, your relationship with the greater good. There can be stress around creativity as well. The 12th house is connected to creativity, that's kind of divine downloads that comes from the angelic realms. So you might be feeling like perhaps you're a creative writer and you've just got writer's block. It's just not coming. I'm not getting that creative impulse that I usually have. Why is it not coming? And that's causing you stress and frustration. Maybe you're a YouTube presenter like me and trying to do an astrology video, and in the background here you are trying to tap into these astrological realms and share your wisdom, and in the background your neighbor's trimming his fence with his hedge trimmer, and it's very loud and noisy, and you're just thinking, oh, I'm so stressed because I can't tap into the divine the way I usually do because of my circumstances are so stressful. That's not really what I'm feeling at the moment, I'll just let you know, but it was an illustration that funnily enough popped into my head. So these kinds of things, your creative flow might be feeling stuck and blocked, and you might be getting stressed by that. Your ability to connect with the spiritual realms the way you really want to, the way that means something to you, might be feeling very stressful to do so right now as well. But also the moon is sitting in your 3rd house for Leo rising people, and so this means that this is where you could be feeling vulnerable. You might be feeling vulnerable about your talents and your skills. 3rd house is the skills of our hands, what we are able to make and create and do, our writing, our communicating, our speaking. We might be feeling vulnerable about that. It might be very possible that, you know, we've been asked to give a TED talk, or, you know, to give a speech at our local university, or to give a lecture at the library about something, and we've got to do some sort of form of communication, and we're feeling like, oh my God, where do I start? I feel so vulnerable about doing that. I feel like I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm feeling like I'm going to shame myself by getting up and doing some sort of communication, some sort of writing, some sort of speaking. Could even be that you're asked to share about your spiritual beliefs or your creative process in some form or another, and that makes you feel vulnerable about having to communicate about these things, these 12th house things. So you end up feeling a little bit shaky, a little bit vulnerable in that area. So the vulnerability can be felt on these days regarding communications, or even relationships with siblings. You might feel vulnerable there, or colleagues. You might also feel a bit vulnerable regarding relatives as well, and sort of relationships with relatives might be feeling a bit tenuous at this time too. So if you happen to be Cancer rising, well, obviously the moon rules your 1st house. The moon rules the sign of Cancer. So this is where you're going to be feeling stressed. Your ability to shine in your own right in this world might be having you feeling a little bit stressed. The 1st house is our ability to thrive, our ability to survive on our own skills and abilities, on our own intelligence. The 1st house is also connected to how we perceived by the world, how the world sees us. So these are areas where you might be feeling stressed. Maybe the world has got the wrong perception about you. They think that you're X, Y, Z, and they've got it all wrong. Really, I'm, you know, A, B, C. You know, the perception of the world has of you is giving you a sense of stress right now. People think that I'm a certain way, and I'm not really. They might think I'm nasty, but really I'm so kind and loving. They've got it all wrong. The perception that the world has is giving you stress, or your ability to survive and thrive in the way you want to be able to share your individuality with the world, is under pressure, is under stress right now. And this can be as a result of the eclipse, where you are being asked to change and grow through the eclipse that's occurred in your first house, seventh house axis right now. And so your whole identity, your whole life trajectory is being asked to shift, and you feel a bit stressed by that at this stage. Also, the moon is where we feel vulnerable. Your home life can be where you're feeling a bit vulnerable now. For example, the eclipse might have brought up an opportunity for you to move to the other side of the country for work or for love or something, and your home life's obviously going to go through a lot of upheaval. Can I do this? Do I want to change homes? Do I want to change community? The fourth house is connected to our relationship with community. Do I want to change community? Can I do that? I'm feeling vulnerable in that regard. Am I able to go through that tenuous change that's being required of me to make this big move? So areas to do with home, your place of living, family, your heritage, your roots and your lineage. These are all areas that you might be feeling quite vulnerable about and a bit tenuous and maybe even a little bit upset about at this time. So just watch out for that. Now, Gemini rising people, this energy, obviously if you're Gemini rising, Cancer is your second house, and Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon, and that's why you're going to be feeling a little bit stressed this week in areas to do with your finances, your resources, the ability to support your body's journey through life. So maybe there's been a change because of the eclipse in what you're earning, what your income is. And there's been a sort of a shift there that the eclipse has brought about. And so now you're feeling a bit stressed. Okay, I'm going to need to take on some extra work now in order to make ends meet. Or maybe my wife will have to go back to full-time work so that we can pay the bills. You know, my son is turning 15, he's going to be old enough to have a job. He's going to need to go get one because we just can't manage without his, you know, him working too. You know, you're going to be looking at your resources, you're going to be looking at your income, how everything balances up and how you're managing. So you can actually have to might be having some stress around resources, but it's only for a 2-day period. It's a transit, not a permanent situation, and it will be most likely as a result of the changes that have occurred during the time of the eclipse, and therefore it's just some redirecting, just some alteration to fit in with the new paradigm that's wanting to come in at this time. So you can expect that might crop up for you where you feel a bit stressed in that realm just for a couple of days. But then we look at where the moon sits transit wise, and here it is over here in the 5th house. This is where you might be feeling vulnerable. You might be feeling vulnerable with regard to your children. Maybe your son's kept, getting in trouble at school and you've had to go in and have a meeting with a teacher. Or your daughter is hanging around with friends that are just no good and you're a bit worried about her, and so you feel vulnerable because your children and their lives are a little bit tenuous at the moment, and they're struggling right now. So it makes you as a parent feel a bit vulnerable. Or it makes you might feel a little bit vulnerable regarding your love relationships. Maybe you've had a fabulous romance that's been unfolding for a few months, and then suddenly your lover has to go, for an overseas trip somewhere, and you're not going to see him for 3 months or something because he's got this big long business trip or tour or something that he has to do, and you feel a bit vulnerable, like, oh wow, now I'm going to feel really lost without you, that sort of vulnerability regarding relationships. Or maybe you feel like, don't know if this relationship is going to last. I feel like I've bared my soul to this person, and now what's going to happen? We're in a vulnerable state with our relationship. But it's only, like I said, it's a 2-day transit. It's not a big long-term, months on end feeling like, well, does he love me, does he not, that kind of stuff. You might also experience a period of vulnerability if you're going out partying and having fun and doing some hobbies and all those fun things that we see. This is the house of fun, the 5th house. Well, it's funny, but doing those sorts of activities might sort of put you in a position where you feel a little bit vulnerable. Let's say that you're brilliant at woodwork, it's your hobby, and you love to, make wooden toys or something like that, and you've decided you're going to open a market stall. and see how they sell, these beautiful wooden toys that you make. And so you open up your market stall, you're making yourself very vulnerable regarding your creative intelligence and your creative expression. And so there can be a feeling of vulnerability. Will people like what I'm doing? Is this something people enjoy? And you feel vulnerable regarding the creative expression that you're putting out to the world. So that's just another example of the areas this can play out in if you happen to be Gemini rising at this time. Taurus rising people, there we are. Gonna sit there for me. Yay, go Taurus. No, it's not. Taurus rising people, we have the moon ruling, if we're Taurus rising, we have the moon ruling our third house of the skills and the talents that we have, our ability to learn, our ability to communicate and verbally interact with other people, to speak in public, to work in realms of advertising and media, to have a small business. These are third house realms, and even do short travels too. This can be where we're feeling a little bit stressed right now. If we are Taurus rising, we might be feeling a bit stressed about our small business. Maybe our small business, we thought it was going great guns and it had all the promise and potential in the world, and we sit down on the 9th and 10th and have a good look at the books and think, oh my God, it's not going anywhere near as good as I thought. What can I do to change? And you might be having a bit of stress about how can I give my career, my small business more momentum, more oomph, more scope. And you start evaluating that, but it gives you a little bit of stress. Or maybe you're a teacher and there's some situation that crops up at school regarding students or regarding the people that you're trying to communicate with daily in your work as a teacher, and there's a stressful situation. They're not understanding. Maybe you're a maths teacher and they're not understanding some concept that I'm trying to share. It's just going over their heads, and I'm stressed about how can I impart this knowledge to my class in a way they're going to understand. So it can cause a little bit of stress that way. Or maybe you're studying something, maybe you're doing a hairdressing degree, or you're a building apprenticeship or something like that, which would be seen by the third house. And there's a stressful situation that arises. Could arise out of sort of a mistake that you make, or it could arise out of maybe some sort of outer circumstance that's nothing to do with you, but there's some sort of a stressful situation. Oh, I'm a building apprentice and my boss hasn't got any new contracts for the last month, so what's going to happen? There can be a feeling of stress regarding some kind of a learning situation that you're in regarding the skills and abilities that you utilize your hands for, building, hairdressing, plumbing, that sort of stuff. You're using your hands to do this sort of work. But of course, that's what the moon rules, and that's where we can feel stressed. But where we feel vulnerable is going to be where the moon is currently transiting for 2 days, and the moon is going to be transiting your 6th house. So you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable with regard to your daily work and your daily routines. This ties in if you're an apprentice and in the situation that I just described, where you're feeling a bit stressed about something. You might be feeling vulnerable about your daily work. Is the boss going to get another contract for a house so that I've got work to go to next week? That sort of situation. You might be feeling vulnerable about your health right now. Maybe you had a test at the doctor's and you're waiting to hear the results. Is it going to come back positive or negative? What am I going to hear? Is it going to be okay? So you can be feeling a little bit vulnerable in that regard too. Maybe you're feeling a bit vulnerable regarding your pets. 6th house is pets. Maybe you've got like a cat that's just meant the world to you for years, but he's getting on in years, and right now he's sort of not very well. He's really lethargic, and you're feeling a bit vulnerable about what's going to happen if my little fluffy doesn't make it through this period, or if there's this feeling of vulnerability connected to the pets and our domestic animals that we love. 6th house. So there are areas that could be playing out for you if you're Taurus rising this week. And finally, having had to wait till last, I'm sure you poor Aries people don't like to wait till last. They like to be first. Aries rising, well, of course, Cancer for you, which is the sign ruled by the moon, is your 4th house down here. So this is where you might be feeling a little bit of stress at the moment. You might be feeling stressed regarding your family or a family situation, some sort of dynamic with your heritage, you know, your ancestors or your parents. Can be seen, or family in general, your family, like you're the mum or the dad and you've got kids and your family is going through just a particularly stressful couple of days. So family, but your home can also be a source of stress at this time and could be stressing you out. Maybe you've just discovered termites like I did 2 years ago in my laundry, and oh, the stress that caused, my God, it was horrific. Stress regarding a home, I hope that doesn't happen for anyone. Touch wood, that does not occur. But yes, there might be some stress about home or paying the bills for home or getting in a builder to do a renovation or something that's causing a little bit of tension, bit of anxiousness at this time. So those are the realms where we can be feeling a bit of stress for these couple of days, and usually it's going to be a result of something that shifted because of the eclipse regarding our home life and our family life or our place of living. Maybe we've got to move or something like that. But where we feel vulnerable is actually for Aries rising in the 7th house. The moon is transiting the 7th house when this T-square is being made, and this is where we're going to feel vulnerable. So you guys might be feeling vulnerable relationship-wise, and that can be a business partner. Maybe your business partner's sort of alluded to the fact that he's going to pull out and wants you to buy him out or something like that, and you're like, oh my God, where am I going to get the money for that? So it could be a business partnership that's causing some feeling of vulnerability. It could be a marriage relationship and you're feeling vulnerable in your marriage. You've confessed something to your partner and you know you sort of he or she hasn't responded and let you know what they think, and you're left on tenterhooks feeling vulnerable, feeling like, well, what now, you know? Maybe it's a vulnerability connected to just other people in general, because the 1st house is you, how you experience the world, you and your individuality. The 7th house is others, everyone else in the world. So you might be feeling very vulnerable with regard to other people right now. Like, you know, I just don't want to be around other people. I feel like I'm always judged. I feel like they're always looking at me. And not that that usually bothers an Aries person, but you might be feeling vulnerable about that sort of stuff right now. About what others are saying about me, might be feeling vulnerable about, you know, just the dynamic that you have with other people in the world. So these are the various areas we can be feeling the influence of the planets in at this stage. So enjoy as best you can this mid-eclipse cycle, because like I said, it's about addressing some issues like areas of vulnerability, areas of stress that we need to work through and process to help us come out the other side so that we're ready for next week's big banger of an eclipse up here in Capricorn, which I'll talk about in next week's video. But let's close with a prayer. Energy of love in the universe, we want to say thank you for the eclipse cycle that helps us up level and step up on the next rung of the ladder to our enlightenment, helping us to become all that we can be. So we thank you for what eclipses bring us. And in this midweek eclipse cycle, we know that you're doing work in us at a subconscious level and in our outer circumstances to refine us, to purify us, to enable us to rise up. I pray we work with this energy as best we can, that we are, you know, step into conscious awareness of what's going on so that you can do your work, and so that we can embrace next week's eclipse with knowledge and power and readiness for whatever is to come. And so it is. Thanks for joining me once again, and I will have a brand new video for you next week. Looking forward to sharing with you then.